Well, no, you're gonna be in the same camera shot, so let's see. Mike, is he good? Okay, all right. Yeah. What's better for you? Okay. Julie's, yeah. Okay. He's gonna be our interpreter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure, closer the better.
Yeah. Okay.
I just don't want to take the attention away from him.
Sure.
You are
Yeah, we'll have
more than
three.
welcome to.
Yeah, no, we'll have three people.
But then it's all eyes on me.
That's okay. We need to see
Still
you.
getting used
All we
to
need
it.
to do is hear, but we do need to see you.
If I set chairs right here, we could. Julie's looking at your chairs.
No problem. Probably won't need it.
Thanks for joining us. Got everybody? Everyone set? Very good. Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm here at the city's Emergency Operations Center. Joining me are the leaders of our Office of Emergency Services, our Incident Management team, and members of our city's executive team. Today, we want to provide an update on the work that we've done to recover from last week's storm and preparations for the storm that we expect to arrive tomorrow. Before I do, I believe I speak for all San Diegans when I say that our hearts are with the residents of our southeastern and South San Diego communities, particularly the neighborhoods of Southcrest, Encanto, Mountain View, Rolando, and San Ysidro. As these communities begin to recover, we're offering not just our hearts, but we're also lending our hands. Every day since the storm, our stormwater, environmental services, transportation, and public utilities departments have been on the ground in those same neighborhoods. They've been clearing storm channels, culverts, and drains of accumulated debris with the benefit of the emergency powers authorized by my local emergency declaration that allows us to move more quickly and around normal regulatory approvals. My community engagement team in the mayor's office, along with city council staff, have been in the most heavily impacted neighborhoods of Southcrest, Mountain View, and Encanto, making sure that residents have the resources that they need to recover and to prepare for the upcoming rain event. They've been going door to door daily, handing out flyers with the latest updates on available services, distributing donated supplies, and soliciting resident feedback and input on their needs. I want to thank these members of our city team, and I also want to thank community members and neighborhood nonprofit organizations for what they've done to come together to provide information on the needs of the community to the city while also helping these neighborhood residents. I also want to thank our city crews who have been working literally around the clock, both to recover from last week's storm as well as to prepare for the storm that will arrive tomorrow. Now, I want to reiterate, as much as we have been focused on helping residents in these impacted communities recover, we've also been preparing for the rain event that will come tomorrow. As I mentioned, we have cleared storm drains and storm channels. We've picked up accumulated debris from homes. We're delivering pre-filled sandbags to these neighborhoods and making them available at neighborhood recreation centers. However, given what we saw last Monday, the ground in these communities remains saturated. The significant clearing that has been accomplished in the storm channels and storm culverts. Today, we will be taking an extra precaution to protect the residents of these communities. Soon after this briefing, we'll be issuing an evacuation warning to residents in low-lying areas that endured flooding last week. Let me say that again. Soon after this briefing, we will be issuing an evacuation warning to residents in low-lying areas that endured flooding last week. Now, I want to be very, very clear. This is not an evacuation order. This warning is voluntary, and it is designed to encourage residents in these flood-prone communities to prepare if and when evacuation does become necessary. Residents in these areas should consider gathering important documents and belongings and make sure that you have a plan to move yourself, your family, your pets out of harm's way should major flooding occur. If you are willing and able, we are encouraging residents in these low-lying areas to seek alternative accommodations. The city is establishing a shelter at the municipal gym in Balboa Park, and we'll be providing transportation to those who need it. We will have extra public safety and swift water rescue teams in these communities. And should a mandatory evacuation order be issued, the San Diego Police Department will make contact door to door. Now, in preparation for this storm, we're asking all San Diego residents to sweep and pick up trash, leaves, and other debris that can collect around storm drains and gutters near your home. Keep lids securely fastened on your trash and recycle bins and place each bin 2 to 3 feet away from the curb so that stormwater is not impeded. Know the safest routes to and from your home or property should flooding occur. And if you don't need to be on the road during the storm, please support our local first responders by staying home. And of course, never ever drive, ride, or walk through floodwaters. Throughout the storm, crews will be monitoring the more than 46,000 storm drains citywide. The city's storm patrol, which consists of transportation and stormwater department staff, will be fully mobilized to monitor areas throughout the city and respond to incidences such as temporary flooding, downed trees, and branches. The city will close flood-prone roads in advance of the storm. Sand and empty sandbags are available at 11 recreation centers. To find a list of those locations, go to sandiego.gov/storm. And for more information and other resources on how to prepare for the storm, go to that same website I just mentioned. Residents who see storm-related hazards in their communities should report that to the city by calling 619-527-7500. Again, for storm-related hazards in the community, call the city at 619-527-7500 for the quickest response. Of course, if it's a life-threatening emergency, please call 911. I'm grateful to all of the San Diegans who have stepped up to help their neighbors in need get through this extreme weather event, including the dedicated city staff who have been working around the clock to aid in the recovery for impacted residents. Together, we will get through this. With those comments, I'll hand the podium over to our Fire Rescue Chief, Colin Stoll. Chief Stoll.
Thank you, Mayor Gloria. I'm here to communicate to the public that the San Diego Fire Rescue Department is prepared for these next series of storms and have been preparing for several days now. All of our dispatchers, lifeguards, firefighters, they'll be on duty in their facilities tomorrow and throughout the weekend. We brought on extra staff, and in addition to all of our fire stations and lifeguards being staffed, Lifeguard Division will staff up an additional 8 swiftwater rescue teams strategically deployed throughout the city of San Diego in those prone areas that we know are historical problems for us in the flooding. We'll also be bringing in 2 swiftwater rescue teams funded by California Office of Emergency Services. Those will be initially dedicated to the southeast and southcrest areas, but of course be flexible and able to deploy throughout the city. San Diego Fire Rescue Department has also staffed up additional engines to patrol this area and to work to add manpower to that, as well as our technical rescue teams will be available citywide to be able to respond to those in need during these floods. As I tell you now that the Fire Rescue Department is prepared, my next message, and you heard it from Mayor Gloria, is that we want you all to be prepared as well. Making that plan that he referred to, practicing that plan, communicating that with your family, knowing where you're going to meet up, how you're going to get a hold of each other is essential. Plan that ahead of time. Gather up those documents, prescription medications, glasses, charging for your personal devices. All of those things should be gathered up in preparation for that. And as you look to your escape routes or your evacuation routes, have secondary means. Do not plan to travel through roads that we know are historically prone to flooding in those areas. We want you to be prepared in advance. And as Mayor Gloria said, this evacuation warning is voluntary. But if you choose to do so, we ask you to do so in advance. Do that earlier. Do not wait for the heavy rain and the flooding to start to begin those evacuations. The earlier you can do it, the better prepared for your families, and the better able we will be able to respond to those areas and help those in need. If you are going to travel through to any of the evacuation centers, we also ask that you be very cautious in your driving. Do not drive around barricades, obey all signage. Do not drive through standing or moving water. There is no way for you to tell how deep those are. And many of the rescues that you see us performing of people inside those vehicles had no idea how deep that water was until they get stuck. And so again, I ask you to do this early. Do not wait till late tomorrow morning. If you have already experienced recent flooding or you know you're in a flood-prone area and neighborhood, we ask you to make those advanced preparations and be ready to do that sooner than later. Now I'll turn it over to our Transportation Director, Bethany Bizet. Sorry.
Good afternoon. Since the storm on Monday, January 22nd, the Transportation and Stormwater Departments have taken unprecedented efforts to clean city streets and restore access to the right-of-way. Additionally, and most importantly, we have deployed extensive resources to perform emergency channel clearing activities. Since the January 22nd storm, Over 100 city staff and contractors have performed inspections and emergency channel clearing. Over 4 miles of channels have been cleared or inspected in the past 5 days, and the Choyas Creek from Beta and Birch Road to Ocean View and Cottonwood Creek from Osborne to 43rd Streets will be fully cleared by this evening. For comparison, annually, the city has only been able to perform maintenance on 4 channel locations. The scope of the channel clearing since last Monday has only been possible due to the city's emergency declaration, which has allowed us to activate extensive resources, funding, and contractor support to achieve this goal. City crews have worked multiple shifts daily to ensure the maximum level of flood resiliency within our communities. And now that the Choyas Creek and Cottonwood Creek channels have been maintained, we have restored the channel capacity, which will help ensure the channel is able to best handle the upcoming stormwater runoff. It's important to note that this work has been critical to help minimize flooding. However, we cannot prevent flooding. The National Weather Service is forecasting tomorrow's storm to bring less total rainfall and a lower intensity than the storm on January 22nd. However, we do expect flooding, and we are preparing resources to be available to proactively close roads when needed. Today, city forces are preparing for our storm patrol activities, and we are expecting areas within the 100-year floodplain to be impacted by the upcoming storm. We are planning for the full force of 350 employees from the city's transportation and stormwater departments to be available for flood fighting efforts tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Bethany. Thank you, Chief. Naturally, we have most of our city team here available to answer any questions I'm sure you will likely have, but I just want to reiterate my appreciation to all who have been mobilized over the last week and a half or so. The end is not near. We have this rain event, and then, of course, we're predicting another one next week. And our message today is for folks to take this seriously. Take personal preparations that you can take to help lighten the load for our first responders who will be doing some very important work over the next few days. Have a plan, make sure you're ready to deploy it if necessary, and know that the city will be providing every asset that we possibly have to make sure that we can get through this as safely as possible. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions y'all have, and of course our team is here as well. Yes?
Are there any lessons learned from the past week that are being implemented for this upcoming storm?
Might defer to some of our incident management folks or transportation, chief operating officer. I think one of the things that I'll tell you that in addition to the storm preparation and storm response, what I need to draw more attention to is the need for medium and long-term housing assistance. And that is an urgent concern right now. We still have folks who may not be able to access their properties for some period of time. So with regard to where I think the public's attention, philanthropic support, as well as our continued advocacy at the federal level for a FEMA designation to get additional resources, that's where I'd like to see more help go. The donations are great. Folks have been very, very generous. What we need to find are ways for people to be able to predict where their housing situation will be for a measure of weeks and months, not a couple of days at a time. So in terms of what we've experienced the last few days and what I'm spending a lot of time on, it's that issue of housing insecurity and trying to work with the county, the state, the federal government, as well as philanthropic resources to make sure that folks have a place to go, they have that security as they work to rebuild. I'm sorry, Bethany, yeah, please. Bethany can talk from a more technical perspective.
The events over the past week have just heightened the importance of channel maintenance and the funding needed for these types of activities. City infrastructure is critical to our well-being and our communities, and we must invest and we must maintain that infrastructure in a way that helps provide flood resiliency. This is critical. This is important moving forward, that we dedicate the appropriate resources to do so, and the city understands the importance of this moving forward.
Others? Yes, ma'am.
I know the city crews have been working nonstop over the last couple of days to clean as much as they can. We received some complaints from San Cruz residents. They were saying that a lot of trash came from Tijuana and got stuck in pretty much behind the San Isidro outlets. And they were asking if that is going to clean up or how it's going to work.
The question was about San Ysidro storm clearance. Chris McFadden, our Deputy Chief Operating Officer, can speak to that.
Sure, good afternoon. Of course, the Tijuana River Valley is a very well-known floodplain. A lot of those waters have yet to recede. The positive side is that we've been working with the county. The county actually has a proactive plan to actually do a lot of the capture south of Monument Road. A capital improvement plan is actually in the works for that, which will help alleviate that. Of course, with the heavy federal investment that's been committed south of the border, that is a critical infrastructure that has to be in place in order to make significant improvements there.
Mayor?
Sir.
I don't know if this is a question for you or someone else, but
We'll figure it out.
I'm focusing on folks who have lost their vehicles, their
Yeah.
cars, SUVs, et cetera. For those who don't have comprehensive coverage, they're in a pickle.
Yeah.
What can the city do, because they're without transport now,
Right.
to do to help them?
Right. That is a question, or that is a, as I've been out in the community talking with those who've been impacted, that is sadly more frequent than people may appreciate. I think many of us may take for granted our ability to have comprehensive coverage. That is not necessarily everyone, right? And that's really obvious in these conversations I've had with residents. To date, John, I don't have a great answer. This is a part of where philanthropy may come in. This is why we're pushing that FEMA declaration, recognizing that will not be a cure-all, that will not make people whole. But with an average reward of about $5,000, you can see how that could help at least address this near-term issue that people have for mobility, be able to get to work, take care of their kids. Obviously, we want folks to file claims. I've talked to a lot of people, and I'm not necessarily on cars, but on housing, the number of companies that are declining to cover claims by residents is very distressing. I know our insurance commissioner is here today, and we'll be taking that up with him. But with regard to uninsured vehicles, it's a very difficult situation, and that's why you see us being so vocal, both with federal advocacy for those resources, asking the state for assistance. I met with the OES director for the state of California yesterday, and then our continued work with great groups like the San Diego Foundation, who are leading the charge on the philanthropic end. We need to get those resources in the hands of these people for whom there are no other options. If insurance is not going to cover it, if they personally cannot make something work for it even on a temporary basis, we really need to get resources, and that is certainly an exposed issue. But as important and as critical as that is, I want to point out that is secondary to the housing issue. Obviously, we need to make sure people are sheltered. Last thing I would maybe mention in this space, there's been a lot of coverage about towing in the area. I want to point out that some of that towing is necessary in order to allow Bethany and her team and Todd and his team to be able to do the work to prepare for storms, right? These vehicles in some cases are blocking our ability to remove mud and debris, which will potentially add to flooding. We've been working with tow companies in the cities and is waiving fees associated with this. We know that people are in a tough spot. We're not trying to make it more difficult, but we do want to make sure that as much as possible we can minimize any additional damage that may come from the storm that we're expecting tomorrow. Yes.
Can I ask just one quick follow-up this way, Mac? We just returned from Choice Creek, and they're down there working, but I don't know how you're possibly going to get that cleared. There is just mud feet deep as far as the eye can see. Are you really confident about getting that cleared?
Looks like Chris is going to get that.
Sure, again, Chris McFadden. So Choice Creek, it's, to be very clear, it's at best a 10-year storm event that it can convey. So that's very important to note. Even though it's been cleaned out, anything beyond a 10-year storm event is still going to surcharge. And because the houses are in the floodplain in so many areas, that's part of the reason why it's so critical to get this message out now. But to answer your question, all those areas that we articulated before, we are confident by the end of the day, we'll be able to remove that vegetation and sediment that we think is going to really help conveyance in that watershed. Ultimately, it's the capital improvement projects, dozens of which we already have planned, to really need to look at this, not just from a creek, but up in the watershed, capturing that water as soon as possible, slowing it down, and in some cases, making the creek wider. And making the hard decision, acquiring property in those areas. There are some places in Choice Creek where we have to entertain really getting those properties once and for all out of the floodplain.
If there's not, I'm happy to, if no first timers, I'm happy. Did you, I'm sorry, you didn't, sorry, let's please.
Gloria, this is about those experiencing homelessness.
Yeah.
Have you been sending outreach teams to, say, the San Diego River to try to clear them out of there to make sure? I know that it sounds like there's some emergency water people to rescue them, but
Yeah.
have there been outreach teams going to the San Diego River?
They're out there every day. But often the message on a normal day is, here's help, it's available. Are you willing to accept services? This current response effort or initiative is about saying, there's a storm that's coming, particularly in the San Diego River. We know this is going to exceed cresting levels, right? So this is going to be an issue, and we'd like you to come with us. We are mobilizing our inclement weather shelter system that adds additional beds to our system when weather metrics are met. They will surely be met because of this storm event. And so we just encourage folks to avail themselves of those services. But yes, the city contracts with a nonprofit organization known as PATH, People Assisting the Homeless. They perform that work literally every day in all corners of our city, but we're making an intensive and a deliberate effort to educate those who are living near waterways where this is going to be an issue, to make sure they know the storm is coming, and to the extent possible that they remove themselves from that environment and ideally go into one of our inclement weather shelters.
I think you alluded to it,
Yeah.
Stormwater funding
Yeah.
issues. Are you interested in trying to find some other way to fund the measure to get them where
Yeah.
they need to be?
We need to.
Whether that's a tax
Yeah.
increase?
We have to have more revenue. There's no two ways about it. The size of this challenge is measured in the billions. We do a 5-year capital plan. Our most recent one, you may have seen, shows about $9 billion worth of needed work with only about $4.5 billion worth of resources. So that's about a $4.5 billion. The climate is changing, and it is really calling the question on how we're going to finance a system that wasn't built decades ago for a different kind of environment, but one where events like what we experienced last week and what we will experience tomorrow becomes something that's more regular in our experience. We're going to have to grapple with this. The council and I are aware of that. We've been working on that. Bethany, when she was leading our stormwater department, got the comprehensive data to tell us what's the size of the problem, so we had good information to work with. Now we need to distill that into a solution that will actually work and can actually be deployed. This is not about performative efforts. This is about getting the job done. And ultimately, it does require new revenue. I will just end with this. I will point out that while we've been getting the data and perfecting a plan, we have been going out and doing work. Reminder that in 2022, we successfully competed for a $733 million federal loan, which will actually benefit many of the areas that you all have been covering in recent days. Again, the length of time it takes to construct these improvements is unbearably long. We will do all that we can to get more resources from anywhere we can, but I think even those efforts will still leave an enormous deficit that will require us to find a local solution.
We have time for one more question.
Yeah. Ross?
So I've been talking to some people that are out in the field and are volunteering their time to assist people with water damage. And a grave concern that's come up is a lot of them are afraid about being exposed to mold and asbestos. Is there any information that you would like to give to volunteers in the next coming days as they continue to help?
Yeah, I mean, you've seen in terms of our calls for needed items, people have been coming forward very generous and offering all kinds of things to try and assist this recovery effort. Included in that is the message around PPE, right? And many of us became very familiar with that term during the pandemic, but it is equally applicable in this situation because of the conditions around mold and asbestos that you mentioned. Certainly would say that for those who have those materials, certainly providing them to volunteers as they perform the work that they've been doing in the last week of removing materials from homes, and then what we expect will resume probably on Saturday after the storm passes. We want to make sure people are taking precautions. I happen to have a chief operating officer that we stole away from the city of Houston who knows a thing or two about flooding. Eric, I don't know if you want to add in some stuff, but I think because as a native San Diegan, we don't experience flooding very much, so there's a learning curve for all of us. To your question, yes, please take precautions to protect yourself, but I think, Eric, if you have anything you want to add on that front with regard to what people ought to be doing with regard to mold and asbestos, I'd give it to you.
Number one thing I could say to everyone is take this very seriously. The storm happened a week and a day ago, 2 days ago. Mold forms in a matter of hours, and the fact that we did not execute a plan, and when I say we, I mean the community at large, to remove furniture, to remove clothing, to remove sheetrock installation, allowed that mold and mildew to basically formulate and expand. So we might be behind the curve, but I will tell everybody to take it seriously, wear the PPE. If you have furniture that got wet truly evaluate whether or not that furniture can be saved, because there's a strong possibility it can't. And I understand and I've met a lot of people who homes were flooded with 1 foot all the way up to 3 foot to 5 feet of water in their home. And I recognize that they've lost everything. Now the question is, what can be saved? But your health is more important. And mold and mildew, you sometimes won't recognize the impact until later. So being very cautious that when your body starts to feel and sense that you're having an impact, take it seriously. Go to the doctor and get checked out. Respiratory issues can set in very quickly, and this is just something that we need to pay attention to. But everyone that's volunteering, wear the PPE, be cautious, and pay attention to the people around you to make sure that they're taking care of themselves. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We'll give more updates as we get them. Thank you.